So today's video is about solving equations. So what does it mean to solve an equation? It means you find what the variable is equal to. So what are the rules for equations? Well, the first rule is that variables like to be alone. So you want to use the opposite operation to get the variable by itself. The second rule is that equations have to be balanced. Whatever you do on one side of the equation, you have to do the same thing to the other side because both sides have to equal the same thing. What are inverse operations? Well, inverse actually means opposite. So inverse operations are opposite operations. Well, we know addition and subtraction are inverse or opposite operations. And we know that multiplication and division are inverse or opposite operations. So how do you solve an equation? I'm so glad you asked.
He is doing it again.
Oh, sorry. You guys ready to rhyme with me?
Yeah.
Mathematical rhyming time with Mr. B. Mr. Dooley ain't got nothing on it. Bring it in. Let's see Bobby Heads. Alright. Now today in math class we're going to talk about mathematical equations. Now in an equation we've got variables, which are unknown numbers, and then we've got all these other numbers that we know. We want to get rid of those other numbers so we can figure out what our variable is equal to. For example, if I have a plus 3 in the equation and I want to get rid of it, what do I do?
Subtract 3.
Subtract 3, exactly. So that's going to be your line today. I'm going to say to get rid of the plus 3, you're going to say you got to subtract 3. Like this. To get rid of the plus 3,
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
You guys got it. I'm going to do it one more time. To get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract
Get
3.
rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract
For the
3.
sake of the flavor as I bring this rhyme, it's Mr. B in the house in this mathematics time. I'm gonna bring it to you straight, just like a line. No bends, no curves, and right on time. So sit in your seats, cause it's time for class. Make sure your pencils are as sharp as broken glass. Mathematical equations are the topic for today, so you better take lots of notes so that you will pass. A simple example, x plus 3 equals 5. The goal is to get the x by itself on one side. To get rid of the plus 3, you gotta subtract 3. But you gotta do both sides or else it's just whack G. Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract
Get
3.
rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract
Get
3.
rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract
Get
3.
rid of the plus 3.
You gotta subtract 3.
Get rid of the plus 3. You gotta subtract 3. But you gotta do both sides or else it's just whack. You take 3 from the left, it leaves you with x. Take 3 from the right side, it leaves you with 2. So x equals 2. That's all you gotta do. Now put 2 in place of x just to make sure it's right. Always check your work. 2 plus 3 equals 5. It's simple as this. It's simple as that.
Remember in math, it's gotta be exact.
Close doesn't count, no matter who tries this. It only counts in horseshoes, hand grenades, and nuclear devices.
Oh. So, that kind of gives you an idea of how we're going to be solving an equation. So basically he kept saying to get rid of the plus 3, you got to subtract 3. And we talked about how an equation, let me take my sunglasses off. We talked about how a equation has to be balanced, and we talked about how variables want to be alone. So the x wanted to be by itself, and it had a plus 3 with it. So in order to get rid of the plus 3, you had to do the opposite, which is subtract 3. So we're going to do some examples, and you'll see how the rap kind of ties into it. So we're going to solve this first equation. So our first equation is 5 plus y equals 28. So in the box, I've kind of given you basically the rules. You want to get the variable alone. That y wants to be by itself. So whatever number is on the same side of the equal sign as the variable, you need to get rid of that number. And then once you get rid of that number, you got to make sure your equation is balanced. That means if you got rid of the 5 on one side, you have to get rid of 5 on the other side too. So whatever you do on one side of the equal sign, you have to do the same thing on the other side. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this 5 because the variable y wants to be alone. Well, they added 5, so that means in order to get rid of it, we have to use the inverse or the opposite operation. Well, what is the opposite of addition? And it is subtraction. So that means in order to get rid of the 5, we're going to have to take 5 away. And then whatever you do on one side of an equation, you have to do on the other side because it has to be balanced. Now 5 minus 5 gives us 0, so we can actually say that we can cancel this out. So we're going to cross them out. And that leaves us with y. And then on the other side, we're going to subtract 5 from 28, and that leaves us with 23, which tells us that y equals 23. So in order for this equation to be true, y would have to be equal to the number 23 because we want both sides to equal the same thing. So now we know that y is 23. So then, of course, we have to check our answer. So to check, you're going to plug your answer into the equation to see if it's true, if it's a solution. So we just found that y is 23. So we want to check it and see, does it work? So our equation, 5 plus y equals 28. We're now going to put 23 in for y. And does 23 plus 5 give you 28? Well, the answer is yes. So that lets us know that we found the correct value of y. So then we have another equation. This is x minus 12 equals 50. Again, we want to get the variable alone. We want to get rid of whatever numbers on the same side of the equal sign as the variable. We want to balance our equation. Whatever we do on one side of the equal sign, we want to do the exact same thing on the other side. So the first thing is we got to get rid of this 12. And to get rid of the 12, we must do the opposite operation. So since this is subtracting, this is a subtraction equation, to get rid of the 12, we have to do the opposite, which would be addition. So we're going to add 12. And then we're going to do the same thing to the other side of the equation, because remember, whatever you do on one side, you have to do the same thing to the other side. Well, because these are opposites, that means they would give you 0, and we can actually cross them out. And then down here, we can add 50 plus 12, and it gives us 62. So now we just found that in order for this equation to be true, x is going to have to equal 62. So our answer is that x equals 62. And again, we want to check it to see if we got it correct. So we're going to plug 62 into the equation to see, does 62 minus 12 give you 50? And when we checked it, it does give you 50. So that means x does equal 62. So now we have another equation. This equation is 5k equals 60. We're going to follow the same rules. We want to get that variable alone. So we got to get rid of the 5. To get rid of the 5, we have to do the opposite. Well, they are multiplying 5 times k, because we know if a number and a variable are side by side, that is multiplication. So they multiply. So to get rid of the 5, we would do the opposite, which is division. So we'd have to divide by 5. And again, whatever you do on one side, you have to do to the other. So we have to divide the other side by 5. Then once we do that, because it's 5 divided by 5, that basically gives us 1. So we can cancel it out. We can cross that out. So we basically got the k by itself. And then 60 divided by 5 gives us 12. So that means that k is equal to 12. So our answer is that k equals 12. And just like before, we want to check it. So we want to plug 12 into our equation. So we have 5 times k equals 60. We're going to plug 12 in. And does 5 times 12 give us 60? Well, the answer is yes. So that means k does equal 12. Our last example is a division example. So we have d divided by 4 equals 12. Again, we're following the same rules as all of the other equations. So we're going to get this variable alone. So d wants to be alone. That means we got to get rid of the 4. Well, this is a division problem. So the opposite of division is multiplication. So in order to get rid of the 4, we have to do the opposite. So we actually are going to use multiplication. So we're going to multiply by 4. And again, whatever you do on one side, you have to do the exact same thing on the other side. So I have to multiply both sides by 4. Well, these 4s are opposites of each other, so I'm actually going to cancel them out, and that leaves me with d, and then 12 times 4 gives me 48. So my answer would be that d equals 48. And last again, we have to check it. So we're going to plug our answer into the equation to see if it's a solution. Well, I'm going to replace D with 48, and then does 48 divided by 4 give me 12? And the answer is yes. So that lets me know I did it correct. So important things to remember. Variables like to be alone. Because they like to be alone, that means whatever number's with the variable, you have to get rid of it. And to get rid of it, you have to do the opposite of whatever they're doing in the problem. And then because equations have to be equal on the same side, whatever you do to one side of the equation, you have to do the exact same thing to the other side of the equation. Once you solve that, it'll tell you what your variable equals, and always check your work by plugging your answer back into the equation. So now go ahead and teach the tiger something you learned in today's video.